All right, nose time. Like with the other ones, we start by just blocking in the main shapes of it. You gotta have a solid framework for it before you really start blocking it in. So just like with the eyes as well, we just block in the skull, quickly just getting some framework around it. What you're currently looking at is just where the nose attaches to the body, just straight up the bony parts.
One way I like to break up so this is specifically for the nose and the mouth, is I like to break it up in planes. So, because they can be quite complex in terms of how many plane changes there actually are, finding a good guide, like a planar guide of a face, can be really helpful for this, just to simplify the shapes down a little bit. Because the shapes can get quite complex, and sometimes it's hard for the brain to sort of take it all in.
Yeah, if you're looking at a realistic skull, it's very hard to see.
Yeah.
There's too much information. Information is good, but too much is just going to leave you confused. And that's not helpful for anyone.
It's basically the same way we approach sculpting, where you start out simple and then you just add more stuff on top.
Yeah. And then just straight up just going and adding in the volume. Again, this is something I do differently every single time.
Yeah.
Block it in and scale it down a little. And this is not like, oh, the Henning approved technique. This is just whatever works.
Yeah.
I wish I had like a Henning approved technique for it. But it's really just get out a triangular shape.
Kind of looks like a weird animal penis right now.
Yeah, it does a little.
But you can clearly see the planes here that you have a few planes on the underside. I would say 3. Then you have 2 on the side and maybe 1 at the top as well. And from there you can start your detailing once you have that in place.
And like we talked about in the nose theory video, it's so important that you not just, if you're just sculpting what I'm currently doing now, and you're just trying to make this like nose shaped thing, that's not going to work. But if you, on the other hand, properly look at what we did in the theory one, and you break it down into what Morten was talking about now, like the planes, then you're going to have a much easier time doing this. Then you're not just winging it. Then all your effort goes back into trying to make very specific shapes.
The noses are cool just because there's so much variation in them.
It really is.
And from the nose, again, you can tell a lot about a person. Well, maybe you can't tell a lot about a person, but you can tell a lot of story in the nose you choose to give your characters.
Yeah, if you're a good man, you get a good nose. If you're a bad man.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can definitely tell a lot, like age, environment, gender, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Again, with everything else, it can sometimes be helpful to make a little mustache on there. To just indicate some detail of what is around, even if you're doing it in isolation, just because sometimes you're not used to looking at stuff in isolation, so it can look a little strange sometimes.
And now we're just blocking in the parts we talked about in the theory video, just getting the cartilage in there. And separating out the cartilage to the fatty pads. You just kind of have to block out the main topology first, just so you have some shapes to play with, and then you can start blocking it in. And you don't have to block it in as carefully as I'm doing here. This is just my personal approach to it. You can keep it more subtle if you want to. I just really prefer to block in these separate parts. Because the nose is so complicated, so I honestly have a really hard time with the nose without breaking it down into this. Like, I'm not actually just blocking this in to show you guys I'm doing it because I need the help here.
Right here where the nose breaks from bone to cartilage, it is actually also the widest point on the nose. You can have a small taper from the tip of the nose up to the cartilage where it hits the bone, but right there in the center of the nose, that tends to be where the widest point is.
It really helps me to just consider that the different parts. The wings of the nose, fatty pads, middle part, cartilage, and the top part, bone. It just reads differently. If you sculpt it based on it being different materials, it just feels different. It's kind of like you would sculpt wood differently from stone to skin. Like for instance, if you're sculpting skin, then that would be affected by gravity. If you're sculpting bone, that doesn't really deform. Obviously, if you drop it, it's gonna be affected.
Yeah, it's still affected by gravity, but not in the same way.
No, it doesn't age based on gravity.
Yeah. Interesting note, though, the skull keeps growing throughout your entire life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you see that on older people as well, like the back of the head sort of like keeps growing backwards.
The more you know.
It's very bizarre. Yeah, our bodies just don't stop growing.
What if like one of your limbs only grew? Like your left leg would never stop growing?
That would be inconvenient.
You can also see the middle part of the nose as well. It has a separation to it. We're losing a little bit, but you can still see that it's hinted at.
Yeah. And again, that's one of those parts that vary, from person to person. And, with age as well, can become more apparent.
Yeah.
Also depends on how much fat I think you have, does any fat collect there? That might not be true, actually. That might not be true.
Fattiest nose.
Check out some reference for that.
Same with the ears as well. Notice how thin your nostrils are. Like straight up, no shame. Put your finger up your nose and just feel the thickness of.
Get in there. Just really go digging.
Go digging. Just feel the thickness of the wings of the nose. I find that to be really helpful. Just because you don't want it to be like a massive chunk. You want it to be a few millimeters thin or however much it is.
For some people as well, the separation between the tip of the nose to where your nostrils actually are is very soft.
Yes.
But then again, this can be very pronounced in other people. So there is no de facto, this is how a nose should look like. There are, of course, some rules that you can't break with the nose because otherwise it doesn't look like a nose. But reference is so key when sculpting any of these features.
Yeah, you could deform this nose from right now, you could deform it into a kid's nose, old lady nose, whatever. You could turn into a Disney villain witch kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, because right now we blocked in the parts of it. Like now all the components are there, and the rest is how do they play with each other? Is there... If you're doing a little kid, or if you're doing this beautiful Disney princess, you don't want a lot of plane changes. You want it to be very soft, like Morten was talking about. Or if you're doing this super old man, like we're doing now, this like brute soldier, you want a lot of plane changes.
The way I like to think about kids' noses and sort of like cuter button female noses is the two nostrils on either side. They're like two spheres, and the tip of the nose in the middle is a bigger sphere. So you have like one big sphere connected to two smaller spheres, and then you just sort of like put a mesh on top of that. That gives you that button nose cutesy feel. That's usually how I approach it.
It's a pretty good way of thinking about it. Because if you start to think too much about, particularly if you want something cute, you start thinking too much about plane changes. Generally, plane changes aren't cute.
No.
If the cuter you want to go, the less plane changes you want, and the more maybe realistic or whatever the opposite is, you want to have more plane changes.
Stylized
stuff. Yeah.
This transition here, I always think is interesting. The way that the bulb of the nose meets the top of the cartilage and the the nostrils. That little triangle that like forms towards the nasolabial fold. It's
one of these that the more you study the subject, the more you realize you don't know. Because after you've been sculpting this, like, yes, now all the planes are technically there and all that. And now you're sculpting a different one and you're like, oh man, this is so different. Did we mention that it's all about reference? We might have mentioned that.
An individual variation. I think we've said it once or twice.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we got that in there.
Maybe you're starting to get it now. Maybe.
Probably say it a few more times.
No, but it really can't be stressed enough. Just because it is the key to success.
Yeah, if somebody asks me, hey, can you sculpt like a Disney witch? I'll be like, I don't know. I mean, show me some reference. What do you want?
Yeah.
But just from imagination, you can probably get close-ish to something. But the reason I know I can kind of sculpt whatever I set my mind out to. I mean, I hope so, because we used to do this professionally, and you just got to be able to. But the reason I know that is because I have a method to it, which is, first gather reference, understand what you're sculpting, and get a base understanding of anatomy, and then just just mix those two together. Your knowledge of anatomy mixed with a reference equals Disney Witch, or whatever it might be.
Another good thing to keep in mind is that the little piece in the middle of the nose that connects to the philtrum, right in the center, it will always go lower than the nostril. You won't have those switch places. The nostril can get close to the edge, but it'll usually never dip below the little middle part there.
And now you can just keep decreasing the intensity as well, and just maybe even smooth a little bit, just to get a finer result. I might not actually decrease the intensity, but just sculpt with a lower pressure, or maybe disable the alpha altogether like this.
Yeah.
It's really like going over with some kind of varnish for traditional sculpture, and just smooth the results out. But not in a... It's one of these where it doesn't become less defined, it's just a refinement round. You're killing the unnecessary details, you're simplifying it.
Yeah.
You're killing brush strokes, which they don't really do anything to describe the form, and you're killing unnecessary plane change, and you're cleaning up the shapes.
One thing that can be nice about smoothing things out is that it sort of reveals all your mistakes in a way. Because if your plane changes don't work, you can sometimes get away with hiding it in detail. If you just blast, pores and wrinkles on top, it can be quite hard to discern what is wrong with the sculpt and the model. But as soon as you take away the detail, you smooth out some of these things, you'll be instantly able to tell, okay, the nostril is a little weird here, let me change it like this. So that's what smoothing can really do for you.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're looking at an anatomy model of an animal and you're like, something isn't right here, but it has tons of fur and everything.
Yeah.
Now it's really it's really hard to actually see what's wrong with it, and you can kind of hide the imperfections on the fur, but it still looks wrong. You can't put your finger on it, but maybe the scapula is all the way off. I've seen that a few times where, people are trying to hide their flaws just under a lot of fur, a bunch of fancy stuff, crazy shaders or depth of field or whatever it might be.
Rocks, hide it behind rocks.
Oh, hide it behind rocks.
If you don't want to sculpt noses, just put a rock right in front of the nose.
It's a creative choice.
Yeah, this part of the nose, the bulb there, in particular, keeps growing as you go older.
Yeah.
You can have old people with really fat noses. Yeah, the skin between the two nostrils actually very, very thin.
Again, touch your nose. Get your fingers all the way up there.
Yeah.
Gotta sacrifice something for your art, man.
It's like with... I've heard of people that do a lot of coke. They tend to wear away that little thing in there. Yeah, just because it's very brittle, very thin.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
So it doesn't deal well with that.
Don't do coke.
Don't do coke. Yeah.
Pro flip normal tip for you all.
Weird fact.
You were like, use reference, touch your nose, and don't do coke, kids. Do coke. Yeah, now you can see the C intensity is all the way down. It's basically as low as it can go. And this is also why we had to speed this section up, because if we didn't, well, right now we're just adding some bonus stuff to it. I'm pressing quite hard. But when you're just refining it, you literally can't see what's going on unless it's sped up. I really like playing with the curvature of the nose from the side view. Just... do you want to make it like a really big nose, or do you want to make the curve concave or convex, or what do you want to do? There's a lot of play you can do there to really get different noses.
Yeah. And again, that also changes with where you're from. Yeah. The nose is one of those things that nose and mouth really change depending on where you're from. And there's even within European countries, you can have a lot of variation within the noses. That tends to not happen as much with the eyes and the mouth, but the nose in particular can be very, very different there.
Yeah, it is funny how European countries, which are fairly homogeneous in terms of its genetic heritage, how there can still be so much variation for it. Whenever we live in London, and whenever I see somebody from Scandinavia, I'm like, it's probably a Norwegian person, even on the street. Like, there is something just in your mind which just triggers it. You can't say what it is specifically, probably that they're blonde, but there is just something which instantly goes, probably Norwegian. Even if it's not like the most stereotypical tall Norwegian blonde Viking kind of thing, even if it's just a regular person, it just kind of, there's just something which triggers it. So there's so much individual variation in people, but yet there is some unity within the countries as well.
Yeah.
This might be the point as well where you're looking at a reference and you're looking at 30 different kinds of reference, and now you just start to mash it up and it doesn't look like anything. I recommend looking more at less variation in your reference if you're sculpting a specific thing, because otherwise all the references will contradict each other.
Yeah,
which is infuriating.
They'll definitely all have nostrils.
Yes.
Probably.
Yeah,
definitely probably.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see here now I'm just adding some mid frequency. I should probably disable symmetry for this. And just adding some, you would only do this for like older people. And we're not doing pores. It's just a different frequency to it. And you definitely want to add asymmetry to it. Nobody has a symmetrical nose. One nostril is higher up, bigger than the other.
It doesn't matter how perfect your face is.
No.
Yeah. There's always something.
That's one of the interesting things when we worked in film. We had access to scans of actors and actresses, where you just see that you have this beautiful person and their face is all out of whack. Like, it's
as soon as you see it with no light on, 3D doesn't lie.
No.
Then you just see how messed up it actually is.
Yeah.
It might look perfectly symmetrical, but you never look at a person straight in the middle. As soon as you get that into 3D, you realize how lopsided most people's faces are.
And that doesn't make them less beautiful. That can just be be something which just makes them look a bit different. Yeah, so for these studies, when it comes to symmetry, you don't care at all about pipeline. You just go make it as cool and as asymmetrical as you do. For more production, you want to keep that more in mind, that you don't want to break symmetry too early. But for studies, like everything goes.
Yeah.
Like, this is just a ball of clay. Do with this whatever you want. You're not going to animate this at any point. The most boring animation ever.
Just the nose going up and down.
Yeah.
But this now has, all the major landmarks that a nose needs, and they all work together really well. So then you can start to play around with it. And this is also the point where you can start to tweak the character of the nose here. If you decide you want something else. You can still turn this into a kid's nose, for example. There's nothing stopping you from that. That gets harder and harder as you add more detail, obviously. Do you have any interesting nose facts you would like to share?
I mean, this is going to sound stupid, but just think about the function of the nose. It's there to smell. It's not just there to look pretty or, whatever it is. It has a clear function for it. And you have, inside the nose, you have tons of hair. And pretty important, because they filter out everything. So always think in mind what the main function of what it is you're doing is. Not just a blobby shape is floating about on a face.
Yeah.